Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to another WOX webinar. We are going to be talking about one-on-one racing today. So I am Zoe, we have Morgan.
Hello.
And we have Matilda.
Hello.
Morgan has jet lag, so, please bear with her. So we are going to be talking about all one-on-one or head-to-head racing today. But we are going to have a sort of special focus on the Henley Regattas, Henley Women's and Henley Royal. They have supported us to do this event, which is fantastic. Just touching quickly on the Henley Regattas, we aren't going to do too much in terms of things like sort of steering specifics for Henley or things like warm-up specifics for Henley, circulation patterns, that kind of thing, because we are going to be running a course walk for each of the events. So one for Henley Women's and one for Henley Royal. I'm actually going to throw the links to those into the chat now. You can also find the Henley Women's one on our social media. We haven't yet started advertising the Henley Royal one, but we will do so probably tomorrow. So those events are going to be more specific for the regattas themselves, and we will be there in person with you all, walking down the course, discussing all the different bits and pieces, all the landmarks, tactics, all sorts of things. So we'd love to see as many of you there as possible for those. If you do have questions as we go along, please do answer them. I will be trying to answer as many as possible. We'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end, but otherwise, I think we're going to jump right in.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Morg, I think this one's to you.
We're going to start nice and simply, and I'm not going to give you a race plan. I'm going to give you some things to think about so you can actually plan and write your own race plan. And this is something that is going to be fairly quick from kind of our end, but each of these sort of points and steps are going to allow you kind of like a foundation or a skeleton that you can formulate and build your race plan off with your crew and with your coach to kind of get the best idea of it. So the first thing I want you to think about is you're going to strategize by knowing about the race. Within this, you'll think about the conditions, and then you're going to think about how you can remain internal and focusing on your hull speed and how your boat's moving whilst being an actual racer and racing the race. So if we go to the next slide. The strategy element and knowing the race. So you want to know we're going to be one-on-one. So you want to know how far that race is. You want to know where the markers are so you can tell how far or you are in the race or when you're going to do certain moves. You want to know, is there stream? What direction is that stream? What are the names of the two stations? Which station are you going to be on? And as the event progresses, will you remain on the same station or could that change? And this is something that comes up it's not necessarily going to happen at Henley or Henley Women's Regatta, but this can happen at many other kind of side-by-side regattas around the country. Ross Regatta is an absolute corker with its staggered start and staggered finish. You need to know if there's going to be a stagger. So this means if you're racing an event where there is a turn or a bend in the course, you might be starting at a slight angle or you might be finishing at a slight angle. And you need to know which direction that goes, because you might be in a situation where you could be half a length up coming into the finish, but if the stagger's half a length and you're half a length up, you're going to be even, and that's going to be a dead heat. So really knowing and understanding that that's going to go into your strategy. So for example, if you've got a half a length stagger at the finish line, you know you're half a length up and you've got 100 meters to go, you might have a what if scenario. You might have a call that you make in that situation to make sure that you finish 3/4 of a length up, or you take that extra seat. So knowing these sort of things is going to make quite a big difference. Next slide, please, Tilds. So here is an example. This is a lovely map. If anyone can guess, it says Monmouth Road A40. This is Ross on Wye. This is the Ross Regatta track. So as you can see here, there is a staggered start and a staggered finish. It's only a 750-meter race, so you can think that makes quite a difference. There's also stream, so you're going to want to be in the middle of the river because you're racing with the stream. And there's also a fairly decent sized bend. So taking all these things into consideration, having an idea and understanding of how you're going to race on that track and how different things play into this. So if you're holding someone on the outside of a bend, you want to be saying to your crew, like, we're in a really good position here. Like, we're holding them on the outside of a turn. Shortly, their turn's going to run out, and then we're going to get moving, and then we're going to get going. So those little things can make a big difference in how you strategize and you plan your race plan. Next slide, please. Conditions. So we want you to try to take time to work out what the prevailing wind is in your racing destination, what direction that is. Is it wind against stream? Now, I bring this up because if the wind goes against the stream, you're going to get some lovely white horses. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. Might be some water coming into your boat. Nobody wants to sink in the summer. Sometimes it can happen. You don't know. So it's being prepared for those things. In training, you're preparing yourself to race. So if you get opportunities in training where it is wind against stream, you can make a bit of shape. You can be loose. You can be relaxed in those conditions. That's going to help you on race day. If you know, okay, the prevailing wind is going to be that scenario, you can build those calls into your race plan. Lots of events are going to have areas of shallows. Now, we should never assume they're going to be marked out by marker buoys or some sort of, I don't know, caution tape or a marshal. Make sure you take the time to ask someone who knows the water. Ask some locals about where the shallows are, about how that makes a difference. It also makes a difference if you're racing on a course with stream, because the stream is going to flow in the areas of the deepest water. So if it's shallow, not going to be very fast. And then exposed areas. So any event, any exposed area where maybe there's a gap in between the buildings, wind might come through there. It might be diverted at a different angle. If there's a wide area and then suddenly there's concrete walls, you're going to trap the wash in, it's going to be bouncier. So a prime example of this on the next slide is going to be a picture of Henley Royal Regatta. So we'll just go to the next one. And we've got a lot going on here. So a normal clear river, Henley's unique in the fact that we get the booms put in. We've got like the media tent that's all the way out. The finish line sticks out. The kind of concrete banks, they're going to bring up the wash. We've got river traffic. The booms mean that, yes, in some parts the wash doesn't get in, but then there's the occasional break in the boom highlighted by the circle here. That's where the wash is going to come through. So you want to build in calls that are going to say, right, in 3 strokes, get ready for the wash. You know, we're going to push the bows high through the finish. So those little things are going to make a big difference. So being aware of obstacles or elements of the track in which you're racing and how they influence the conditions. All right. I want you guys to think about staying internal and using that as your way to be offensive in your planning and your attacking. So you're going to formulate your plan. We want you to stick to it. That doesn't mean don't race the race. It means race your way. Don't get drawn into racing someone else's way. If you're staying internal, it gives you the best chance so that you can feel your boat. Being able to feel the boat is going to tell you all the answers you need to go fast. You can use the other crew as a reference for how you're doing. Are we down? Can we bring it back 1 seat? Now we're level. Oh, hang on, we're a seat up. Right, I want to keep moving. Hang on, guys, we're sitting. Use them as a reference, but don't make your calls a focus of them. So use them to guide and advise your athletes, advise the rowers on how you're progressing down the track and what the next move is, and stick to the process. Next slide, please. Okay, we've got a little video here. So coxing when you're down. Now, this is often challenging and difficult. The secret to it is to just stick to the processes. Feel the boat, be calm, look where you are, use the other crew around you. If you're feeling your hull, you'll be able to tell what you need to do. You'll be able to keep the rowers on board. You'll be able to keep them moving in the right way. If you get worried about being down, you're not going to make the difference up. You've got to think about easy, 1 seat at a time. Does it feel better? Yes, this is better. Remind them it's better. Encourage them and move from there. So this is a little clip. It's from Henley Royal Regatta in the final in 2022 in the Remenham. With the Brits, I was in the British 8. We were racing the Aussies. And we spent most of the track down. So this is just a little clip of the race where I'm coxing down. It's only a short clip, so here we go.
Guys, sit back on it. This one now. 6 seats down. Stay tall. Our advantage starts now. Sharpen. Go. Sharp. 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 Hell yeah! Here we move, DB. Tall. Into 500. Sam Redgrave. Rebecca Shorten. Leg speed. Go. Leg speed. Leg speed! Leg speed! Leg speed! Leg speed! Yes, we're moving. That's 1 seat back, DB. Hell yeah. Coming into the barrier. Into 600. 5 strikes. Legs, hips. Complete. Go. Complete. 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 Yes, 36. We're moving. Good change. Next 5. Bows out. Go. Bows out. Bows out! Bows out! We're moving! That's 2 more seats! Yes, DB!
So you can hear, you can see by the video, we're quite a long way down. At Henley, you don't really want to be in that position in any side-by-side duel. You don't really want to be in that position. What I would say is it's not over until you cross the finish line. So if you've got that confidence, if you keep thinking about what you're doing, what your crew's doing, you stick to your plan and you tell them, you know, when it's working, very descriptive, let them know what you want. I'm not saying anything that's like completely genius here. I think little steps, little pragmatic goals are going to help you to make a big difference. Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's going to play again.
Guys. Okay. Cool.
Over to Tild.
Alrighty. So moving on to the start line and the start area. So I think there's a few things going on here. So this is sort of the areas I'm going to cover, what you might want to be thinking about, how you want to sort of refer to your competitor. It is quite a different scenario where you've just got one other person that you're lining up against, not 5, or at Dorney you might line up against 7 other people. And in 4s and 8s, that's a huge number of people. In this situation, you're looking over, they're right there in the warm-up area, they're right there as you line up. So how you stay internal, stay pragmatic, and stay sort of exactly what Morgan just said there, like stick to the process. We'll go through attaching. There's a little bit of a video there. Nice and simple, keep it nice and calm the whole time. Lining up and then knowing your starting procedure. So we'll start with the attachment and the starting line. So you can see here, there's just a little clip of attaching to a stake boat. It's really, really important that you are familiarizing yourself with the starting layout. So Morgan referred to whether there might be a stagger. You also want to know like what the start procedure is. Is there going to be an umpire on the bank? Is there going to be an umpire in the launch? Is there going to be an umpire at Henley, there's a very clear starting procedure, which I think Zoe will go through. And I think that it's so important that you do the research to know what situation it is that you're about to put yourself and your crew into. And that's your job, to make sure that you've either researched via the website of the event that you're about to do, or talking to people who've done the event before, people who are involved on the morning. You can go up, you can go and watch the starting area. If you are the first race of the day, who might you talk to? Might you talk to an umpire? Might you be able to talk to your coach who's been there before? And I think it's really, really important that you put the work in so that when you get there, you know what to expect and your crew know what to expect. Because the expected is always much easier to deal with than something being thrown at you. Then when something does get thrown at you, you know the process that you will use to go through it. Be really clear in your instructions when you're attaching to a stake boat. You may also have a freestanding start, so you may not have a stake boat. So how are you going to get yourself into a position where your crew know the best thing to do? You aren't being held still, so you might drift left to right. You might be swinging in the wind. The conditions have to be taken into account here. So your instructions must be simple, clear. The fewer words, the better. And then I think that something that's really important, something I've always found really helpful, is having a discussion with the bow pair of my boat. So I will do this on land. I'll do this probably individually with the two of them, and then I would do it with the rest of the crew as well, so everybody knew that those jobs were taken care of. But it's really important that your bow pair understand that it is their job to keep the boat straight. So when you are set off, you may have, Morgan talked about the prevailing winds, you may have a wind that's swinging you across to one side or the other. You also need to think about, does your boat go straight off the start? Because if your boat doesn't go straight off the start, are you wanting to point your boat directly straight? Because you might swing across into the crew next to you, you might swing off into the bank or the booms. So how are you going to make sure that your bow pair understand whether they need to manage themselves on the start on that first stroke, how they need to set the boat up, in which direction you want it pointing, what are you going to say so that they know where you want the boat. And then the weather, like I've mentioned it a few times, there are so many things that could impact the start of a race and where you line up. It could be the wind, but it could also be wash. Like we all know that Henley, that first part of the race, is really sheltered compared to then you come out of the end of the island, there's a huge gust of wind that comes across. Like, how are you going to prepare yourself for that? By sitting on the start line. What are you going to do to preemptively set yourself up to get there in the best position? But then there are other regattas where you might sit there, you are one-on-one, there's a freestanding start, and I don't know, the Elvis boat comes flying past, kicks up a load of wash, and you're there sort of wibbling around on the start line. So what are you going to do to make sure that your boat is, like, you've taken that into account? These videos are really getting to me. Right, here we go. So moving on from that, then I'm going to delve into a little bit, and this will come up again in the psychology part of this, but there being just one other competitor actually isn't as intense or as terrifying as it might seem. It's a unique experience, but you're both in it together. And so it's about how you set yourself up to make sure that you are composed and ready. You know on the start line what it is that you're going to be thinking about. Is it that on the start line you've agreed that you'll only think about the first stroke? Or is it that you'll think about the first 5 strokes? Will it be that you as the cox will talk through what you're going to say in those first 5 strokes? The other thing that quite a lot of boats I've coached will do is use breathing techniques. So do some research on this, but there's different types of breathing techniques you can use, such as box breathing, that will create composure and calmness. It gives you as a cox something to do. You can talk them through it. It clears your mind. It allows you then to just say, okay, this is what we're going to do to get primed for that very first stroke. And it's clear, it's a simple process that you can follow that just takes your mind off the fact that you are about to go and do how X number of meters of pain and exhaustion, and you are setting yourself up to make sure that you're in the best position to attack that. I think it's really important that you operate with both respect and competitiveness. Like, you are ultimately both there to win, and there will be, like, the difficult facts in one-on-one racing is there will be a winner and there will be a loser. And so it's making sure that you are in a position that you are confident going into that, knowing what success looks like, because it might not be the outcome. It might be the race that you've put together that is the thing that sets you up to know that you've been successful. And so if you go into that with respect for your competitor, respect for your teammates, but also that, like, really determined competitiveness, actually being competitive will give your opponent the respect they deserve. And I think that it's important that you balance both of those things. Something else to just consider is the start line is often, you expect it to be noisy, you prepare yourself for these big crowds, this big event, because regattas are fun and it's usually sunny, although we're in Britain. And I think that, like, you get to the start expecting all this buzz and excitement, and it's you and one other crew, and actually you might sit there for 5-10 minutes and it'd be dead silent. And that's quite a weird place to be in. So how are you, like, the breathing techniques, all of those things I've just discussed, how are you going to make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident? Like, actually use that time to be process driven, use that time to make sure you are getting yourself right in that peak point ready to race. And it's a really exciting opportunity, and the quiet will allow that, but almost don't be surprised or shocked by that. So that's the starting area. Steering, I think I've referred to this a little bit already, but a lot of people think steering in a straight line is really easy. It's one of the hardest things to do. And being able to hold a boat straight when you have 4 to 8 people who are obviously trying their best to make sure that they are entirely matched, but will not continuously be entirely matched. It is really, really important that you understand that small movements, gentle, confident responses will put yourself in the best position. And I'm not going to go and discuss, like Zoe said, I'm not going to go and discuss like, oh, at this point in this race, you should be here or there. Actually, it's just you, and you've got to decide what point are you going to pick on your station. So there are 2 stations. You might have a point in the distance that is different depending on the station you're going on. So it might be that in the distance, there's a lovely building for you to look at that you can guide yourself all the way towards down the whole course. It might be that actually that doesn't exist. So what are you going to choose to be able to create a sort of trajectory for yourself, so you know that you're looking up, looking out, ready to go? I think that the other thing is that you set yourself up to know whether your boat's going to go straight or not off the start. Once you're in and moving, it depends, you know, wash coming from the side, wind coming from the side, in front, behind, all of those things are going to affect your steering. So being confident but gentle on the rudder is really important in those situations. And then knowing that if you do end up in a situation where you are down, the wash from that crew and the wake from the crew, the blades, that's going to pull you in towards them. And so being really confident in your steering to make sure that your bows are not getting sucked into that dirty water, so you create a little bit more control of the hull for yourself. Similarly, if you are up, being able to just put yourself in a position where there's enough of that water going back to your competitor that it may be affecting them, but that you are never impeding that line, so you are still being respectful. I think that can be really game changing. And I think you have this opportunity to be up, be down, to create space for yourself to steer the best line. If you are looking behind or you are looking in front and trying to steer off your competitor, you've already put yourself in a negative position. You must be steering your hull that you are in control of. You cannot control what they are doing. The other thing to consider is you and your body. If you look over, which you will have to do to be able to call how many seats you are up, down, where you are, and using that opponent as a reference, how are you going to do that and make sure that you do not affect your steering? Because it is really common to look, and as you look, you will go where you look. So how are you going to keep control of your steering, your rudder? You take a look, you assess, you take the information on board, but you are still in control of where your boat is heading. It hasn't affected that you've been drawn into them because you've looked over. Cool. Zoe, over to you.
Okay, so we have got a guest with us today. Guin Batten hopefully will be able to actually unmute herself and turn her video on if I've done this correctly.
Hello.
Hello. So Guin is she is an Olympic silver medalist in the women's quad. But she is here today because she is a British rowing umpire and also a steward of Henley Royal and an umpire at Henley as well. So she has come to answer some questions for us about Henley, about why why you need to respond to umpires in certain ways, all those sorts of things. So I am going to start briefly just by touching on why it is so important as coxes and steers people that you work with the umpire. So really important that to start with, you don't get on their bad side early on. I was umpiring at an event recently, and I told a crew that they're in the wrong place, that they're in the wrong place on the river in the warm-up. They're the wrong side of the river for the circulation pattern. And they started arguing back with me about it, about actually, no, this is why they're in the wrong place. And they're doing this. And I said, just move. Like, I don't need you to argue with me, just move. So I would start by making sure that you are, as always, being respectful and polite. I think Guin will agree with me. All umpires, marshals, etc., want to help you. So if you have questions, they are always happy to answer them, on the water, off the water. So make sure that you do use them. They're a resource, that they're there to make sure that you have the best race you possibly can. So like Tilds and Morgs have touched on already, it's really, really important that you understand the rules of the race that you are specifically going to. And I think on the next slide, I've got an example of why this is so important with some of the rules from Henley Royal. So at Henley Royal, it's really important to understand that interference is not something that is specifically defined. It's an umpire's decision. The umpire is not obligated to warn you that you're out of your course before disqualifying you. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't actually realize. There is absolutely no reason why they can't just disqualify you for being in the wrong place. They do not have to have been warning you beforehand. And then this is an important one for coaches out there and anyone who might be, in the launches for Henley supporting, for example. Coaches, competitors, clubs, their supporters are all under the same rules and can be sanctioned for unsporting conduct. And that means potentially if you've got someone in the launch who does something unsporting, that could mean the crew gets disqualified, even if they were doing everything right. So it's really important to remember that all the clubs, club members and people associated with the clubs are aware of these kinds of facts. So I think what we'll do is, if we sort of start at the very beginning, so the start. So Guin, you and I were talking about this earlier, weren't we, about how one of the biggest misconceptions at the start is that if your hand is up, the race can't be started, and that's incorrect, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no reference to hands at all in any of the rules. So, if you look at Henley, so you've got British rowing rules, which are basically every regatta you'll go to. Oh, I love the hat. I lost that one in an 8s race. It flipped off the back. And then if you look at Henley Royal rules, there is no reference to that. So really, in essence, the umpire at the start wants you to get off well, wants you to be straight, wants you to be ready. But if you're sticking your hand up, they could start the race while your hand's up. Chances are they'll probably give an opportunity to put it down. But if you don't put it down, and your boats are straight, they will then start the race. So it's definitely worth knowing that and remembering that. I've seen many crews play a game with the opposition where one puts their hand down and the other one puts it up and then they put it down. I will just go if that starts happening. As long as I consider both boats to be straight, I will start the race.
And I think one of the things I always told my coxes, and this is the same for coxes or steers people, is that if your hand is up, you should be doing something. You shouldn't just be sitting there with your hand up for no reason. You should be actively doing something to adjust the boat or move the boat or do something rather than just playing those games.
Yeah,
but
that's
I think
really good.
A really important one. And obviously for coxes to remember as well, that if you're in a bow loaded 4, the umpire is not going to be able to see your hand. So it's important that the bow seat puts their hand up. So you tell them hand up and they have their hand up in the air as well, to make sure that that's seen. I think the other thing that we had questions about Gwyn was about how the races start at Henley Women's and Henley Royal in particular. So the way that you call them.
Yeah, so British rowing rules are you'll have those at pretty much all of your regattas, and it's pretty standard in that. And they're very specifically, you'll find that the umpires should be very, very consistent irrespective of who you've got there. At Henley Royal, again, it's defined very clearly in the rules. And what you'll find is that the umpires will come together. We meet at the beginning and we define exactly how we will make sure we check that we're as consistent as we can. But they do differ. The two rules do differ. So make sure you have had that opportunity to read those. I got a funny story. So the funny one is, of course, at Henley Royal, we say, you know, I'm going to start you in the following manner. And of course, you then go through and do it slowly, and they don't unfurl.
That's like a practice. If you haven't been
Yeah.
before, that's a practice. So the umpires will say, "This is how I'm going to do it," but that's not the actual start.
And what's quite funny is quite often if you race some international crews that don't speak English, they're off. So yeah, so absolutely. And I have been in a race where my opposition went on the practice. But yeah, that's my funny story. Yeah, no, just be mindful for that. I mean, you could always go down. It's always definitely worth going down and listening to the start.
Mm.
You know, unless
And I
you're
think
9
also,
o'clock on
like Tilda
Tuesday.
was saying, it gives you the idea of the atmosphere, how quiet it is, all those sorts of things as well. I think then the big thing that I really wanted to talk about was about responding to the umpire, and Gwyn, from your perspective as an umpire, what you want to see crews doing if they've been warned. Now, the ideal situation is that actually you never get warned. In an ideal race, especially at Henley, there's no reason to be warned. You should be on your station. You shouldn't be cutting in front of the other crew. You shouldn't be doing anything that requires a warning from the umpire. But if you are getting warned, first thing that's really important to explain to your crews if you're coxing is that if you're in a bow loader, you might not be able to hear the umpire's warning. So if the bow seat can see the flag waving, they need to tell you. And the same thing in the stroke seat. It can be helpful to have your stroke seat just sort of nod their head, you know, or something, have a signal. But it's really important that if you are being warned,
it's massively important. If the umpire has to call you twice before you move, you're already not in their good books, you know. And I think one of the key things is, you know, it is really challenging coming off, especially in a cox's boat as well, coming off the end of the island, especially if there's a bit of stream. You know, even though the course is straight, the river's not straight, you know, and the critical bit at that point is that we can keep the race together. We can get the guys through that section of the race. And often you'll find, you know, the umpires want everybody to race as well as they possibly can and the fastest crew to win. That's an absolute, you know, aim of what we're trying to do. But once the race starts to unfold, and you're going further down that race, if there's any indication in your mind that you think you're going to come across and wash someone down, etc., in that space, if you're the fastest crew, you don't need to do that. I mean, in essence, if you're using brain space up and you're risking a year's worth of training to try and wash the opposition down, with, you know, don't even go there. I think it detracts. It shows a lack of respect, and of course, it really, you know, will undermine your status as a crew in the lead. And at the end of the day, the power of the umpire has that ability to define where the center line is, not you. So, you know, if you're slightly out on where you think that line is versus where the umpire is, and the umpire has by far the best seat in the house to define where that is, you know, you could come the wrong side of a decision, especially if that crew then comes back and you then end up with a very, very close race. So there's some real, you know, I would say the very best crews stay in their water. If I have this when I coach my crews, I say that if your blade tip is closer than 1 meter to the booms, you're too close. And if your blade tip is more than 2 meters away from the booms, you're too far away. So trying to find that really good line coming down is really, really important. And if you're the fastest crew, you're going to win. And why risk anything else? Especially if you're maybe in some of the smaller boats, and those washes can pick you up and move you sideways. And then all of a sudden you're having to steer and you're under pressure from the umpire and stuff like that. So, you know, my advice is the umpire wants the fastest crew to win. The umpire is there to make sure the race is safe and fair, and they have that ability to make sure that if there is any, they can reinstate that fairness, and that's where the interference comes in. So make sure that you don't, you know, do anything particularly stupid in that mix. Okay, does that help, Zoe?
That's really good. And then I think the final thing I wanted to touch on is if you are racing. So an important thing to remember is that, you know, the umpires all have their own nuances. They're all going to be comfortable with different things. So you have to just be responsive. You can't just be sitting there thinking, oh, well, in my race yesterday, I was 1.5 meters away from the other crew and that was fine. You know, it's a different umpire today. It might be different conditions today. They are looking for different things. So you've just got to be responsive to what you are hearing and what is happening in the race. And then the last thing is, if you do feel like you've got to the end of the race and you don't think it was fair and you want to appeal, you put your hand up. And in the time it takes the umpire to get over to speak to you, you need to have formulated a really clear and concise description of A, the problem, and B, how you think it affected you. And, you know, the umpire is going to really respect and respond to something that is short, clear, concise, unemotional. So use that time that it takes them to get to you to formulate what you're going to say and make sure that's clear. And once the decision's made, you know, you accept it sort of politely and that's it, you move on.
And it's really interesting. If you read you read the 2 rules about that, particularly one's a protest at the end of the race. But if you look at both sets of rules from both Henley Royal and British Rowing, you know, the umpire has the ultimate decision. See what I mean? So even if they're wrong, they're right. And it's the same in many, many sports. That does differ to World Rowing rules. And that's where there is a difference between those rules, because in World Rowing they have a president, they have a jury that sits above that. But yeah, just make sure you know your rules if you're going to stick your hand up, because, you know, otherwise, you know, it's, you know, you know, perhaps you might be wasting your time by sticking your hand up. And if I was to say, you know, if you look at Henley Royal rules, okay, the whole lot is is the conduct of the race, which is rule 41. Make sure you read rule 41. It's only 2 pages of a tiny little thing. British Rowing ones, you know, they are huge. But actually, if you were to decide what you were going to read, you know, race rule 611, which is basically the duties of the umpire, and then basically rule 755, 756, and 757. Those are the rules. And that you really do need to know about around interference, and they literally are that big in British Rowing rules. So just make sure you really know your stuff. And I think there is that, you know, making sure you know, if I was to give you top tips, the umpire wants the fastest crews. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. I've done so much homework. Focus on your race plan. Yeah, and I think you guys have mentioned that, because that's super important. Make the fastest crew from A to B is going to win. Yeah, none of the shenanigans and we'll send our washes down and we'll do all this. Don't waste the energy. Just focus on what you're doing. And if the umpire needs to raise their flag, you need to act, and you've probably done something wrong. Okay, or you need to act very quickly because you're about to crash into something, because of course there's safety in there. The one thing that I wish someone had told me, and I raced many, many times at Henley Royal, and I couldn't understand it, and mainly in the single scull. And I couldn't understand it was when I was in the lead, the umpire was always, you know, if I went out of my water, the umpire was always calling me. Whereas if I was in this, it wasn't winning, I could do whatever I liked and meander all over the place. And I couldn't understand why that was. But of course, remember, if you're on the lead and you move out of station, you're washing your opposition down. Whereas if you're behind and you move out of your station, you're not washing anyone down. So therefore, that's where that interference comes in. And as an athlete, I never understood that. But there we go. Anyway, I've probably taken up too much of your time. It's a real privilege to be asked, and I hope to see many of you on the water.
Brilliant, Guin. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. It's been brilliant to hear from you, and yeah, thank you for giving up your time to be here tonight.
Great, and it's so wonderful to have so many of you, and 3 amazing coxswains. I wish I'd been coxed by you guys in my day. So thank you.
Thank you, Guin. And I think we are handing back to Morgan.
Hello, everybody. Okay, well, I don't really know how to follow that section, but I'm going to try my best. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about the psychology of one-on-one racing. Now, the first thing I want to do is remind everyone of the Cox's objective. So we want to put the boat in the best position. It's going to allow our rowers to do their best rowing. None of that involves doing any sort of flair or getting any sort of limelight on you. It's quite simply putting your boat in the best place that allows the rowers to do their best rowing. So if any of your steering starts to interfere with the quality of the movement patterns that your rowers can have and make, then we've got a problem. And how you formulate the psychology of racing, this has to be at the forefront of your mind. As soon as you forget this important objective, the red mist is probably going to come in and you're going to focus on the wrong thing. So we want you to have clarity. We want that clear headspace. We want you to be in that flow state. So you're able to selectively choose and notice which things you give your attention to. You're able to feel the boat. You're able to read the water, read the race, and then execute and deliver or provide the verbal cues that are going to create the best rowing possible within your crew. Okay, next slide. So we've said one-on-one racing is basically the most gladiatorial racing you can do. Now, Tilda spoke about how it can be seen as like it is a bit like being a pressure cooker, but then actually, if you realize it, all racing feels the same. You've got less opponents than you would do in a multi-lane race, which kind of makes it a little bit easier. And the way in which you go about the race remains exactly the same. So use the gladiatorial element as something that's exciting and different and to give you energy down the track. Don't allow it to be something that kind of stresses you out and is a negative. You are going to be able to hear what your opponents are saying. Use that to your advantage as well. Like if you can hear them, you can kind of hear what's going on. You might be able to hear them say they're about to make a move and you know what's going on. That doesn't mean you have to be reactive in your coxing. Still stick to your plan. But you could be saying something like, you'd be going through a technical change and you hear that they're pushing and you'll be like, well, we're holding. We've not even done our push yet. So that can make a difference to the psychology of your race. Sharing that information with your rowers makes a big difference. All right, guys, we're coming into 750. They're making their move. We're just going to hold our rhythm here right now. Stay sharp, just hold. We're going to move in 1 and then go. And so your move might be a little bit later and it's going to give you opportunity to move through. If you were already holding them whilst you're kind of focusing on a technical change, you're probably going to be able to move when you do your push. Hold your line. We've just had a great talk there about how the umpires are going to operate. We all want the fastest race from A to B. We want the smoothest time down the track. We want to allow our boats to go as fast as possible. Hold your line. Don't get caught out. Stay focused, be present, stick to your station. Again, we want you to be proactive and prepared without being reactive. So you can be a racer and you can respond to pushes. You can respond to moves from other boats, or you can respond to moves from your own boat. but that doesn't mean you have to deviate fully from your plan. It's having an awareness to what's happening, what you're doing in your boat. How does your boat feel? Where are we on the track? What's next in our plan? Being confident in that, you should have prepared your plan specific to your crew, and therefore it will be the best thing you can do. If it's someone else's plan, you're probably going to do a terrible job in it. So that's what we mean by being proactive and prepared. We want you to make sure that you're intentional in everything you do. Don't just say something because you think it sounds cool. Like, everything is thought about. You rehearse all of your race day calls in training every single day from the very beginning of the season, the beginning of the year, all the way through to a race day. You've prepared those calls. So you're never going to say anything on race day that your crew aren't going to understand. The intention behind the message means the delivery is going to give you the biggest response, the biggest bang for your buck. It's going to be the best opportunity to create speed. So don't allow the presence of other crews around you and the noise and the external distractions to mean that your racing psychology is influenced. You still stick to the plan. You still stick to your process. You still race your way, not their way. Okay, next slide, please. So psychology of the race plan. You want to build that psychology element into your plan, and that might simply be through visualizing the course. And you might go down the track a few times and go through your race plan. You're building in psychology here, a little bit of imagery. If there are going to be stations that provide advantages, or there is an advantage at a specific time on the race, build that into the verbal cues you use within your plan. All right, guys, our advantage is going to start in the next 3 strokes. This is our plan. And then everyone knows. And if you start to move, right, it's working. Same as if you think someone else has an advantage and you're holding, tell them, tell your crew, like, we're holding here, like, we're holding in their advantage. If we wait another 100 meters, we know ours is coming up. And I want you to have a think about if 2 crews, so yourself and a crew you're racing, have the same physiology and the same technique, what is going to separate those 2 crews? Kind of have that kind of bared into your head. One last bit I always think about running racing is it is never over until you cross the finish line. So when we raced Henley Royal Regatta and I was a length down within the first 500 in the Rem and I'm in the final, I feel like I can confidently say there were a lot of spectators who thought that was done and dusted. Now, at no point did I think, yeah, this is over. This is it. Not one point, not until we cross the finish line. And if there's one good bit of advice I can give you from a psychological perspective of coxing and of racing, is it never believe it's over until you cross the line. There's always a way to make your boat go faster. And that comes from feeling the boat and being present. All right, next slide, Tilds. Breathe. We've spoken about that. Be pragmatic. Practical steps, processes. Use those steps to motivate your crew. Stick to the process. Play to your strengths, not somebody else's. All right, next one, please, Tilds. So when you race, you don't get fast, get faster, get faster, and get faster. You get up to speed, and then you try and hold the speed. But what actually happens is you get up to speed, you kind of hold it, and then you get a bit slower, and then you do a bit of a push, and you get back to base speed, and then you get a bit slower again, and you get back to base speed, and you ride it all the way down the track like that. And you're going to use your calls, you're going to use your race plan to try to maintain that speed. And so it's a little bit color-coded. You're going to start, your start sequence and your finish sprint are going to be a clear set of calls, which are basically technical focuses. It's going to be different slide lengths. You might have more back, less back, whatever it's going to be. Once you've done your starting section or your finish section, you're probably going to push. So then you're going to have a bit of pushing calls. Then you're probably going to motivate them through that push. Then you're going to need to fix your technique again, because you're probably going to do another push again. So the way this lines it up for you is you can't go down the track pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. No one's going to make it. We're going to blow up within the first 500. The race is over. That's it. You've got to think about how they're going to sustain and how you're going to manipulate their physiology, their energy systems, so they can get down the whole track. And that's why we use different calls. So understand what they're probably going through. It burns, it's hard, they're tired, they feel sick. These things are all normal. but you're going to use the calls that you make to manage them and get them down the course. Always do a technical call before you do a push. That might be loosening up. It might be being loose to be sharp. Something as simple as that will mean you get faster when you push, not slower. We've all been in those situations where we've tried to push and we've just got slower. And then use motivation in parts of the track which are difficult. There are always going to be windows of the race course where it's a bit of a no man's land. It's going on a bit longer than you thought it would. The third 500 is a classic one of those. Think about how you're going to motivate your crew to get them down that track. Okay, next slide, please, Tilde. Now, this is a little task that you can take away and you can do yourself and you can do with your crew. So you're going to think about, and you're going to get each individual of your crew to write down, or you're going to write down on a little bit of paper, you're going to write down all the things that you think a race winner possesses that have made them able to win. Go to the next slide, Tilde. You're going to separate these things into mental things, and you're going to separate them into physical things. Next slide, please, Tilde. Now, this might be mental things. It's going to be we're more committed than anybody else. We are just unbelievably determined. We are such a good team. We are so passionate about what we do. These are examples of mental things. It might be we've got an unbelievable VO2 max. We've got great ergo scores. We've got awesome lung capacity. Our legs are so strong. You know, it might be like I've got a wicked bench press. These are all physical things. And then I want you to separate them into their categories. And then I want you to see at the end which category has more. You can have a little guess at the end of which one you think it is. Okay, questions? We're good.
Excellent. So that was great. Anyone stick questions in the chat? We've only got a few minutes left, but we'll try and get through as many as possible. I think we answered most of the ones that were sent in. Unless they were sort of Henley Women's or Henley Royal specific, in which case we're going to try and cover all of those things at the course walk. But if you think it's not been covered, please feel free to email us at thewinningcox@gmail.com, contact us on Instagram, and we will get back to you. So do stick any questions you have in the chat now. I'm just putting in a link to our Buy Me a Coffee, and you can also use the QR code that's on the screen now. We're running these webinars for free. We want to make them free as much as we can, but we do obviously incur the odd cost. So if you'd like to help support us to continue doing this, then please consider bunging a few quid in there. We'd really appreciate that. So I don't have any questions coming through yet. I've looked through all the ones that we had, and I don't think we have any. And there are a couple about sort of specifics about Henley, things like, do we need to wear a life jacket? The answer is yes. But if you've got specific questions like that, you should be able to find the answers to all of those things on the websites. But if you can't and you're struggling, like I say, do email us, do contact us on Instagram, and we will be happy to talk through those things and answer those questions for you. So I don't think we're getting any questions through, which hopefully means that we've just covered everything and everyone is happy.
Here we go.
Do you get called onto the start at Henley Royal? That's worrying because now I've forgotten.
I don't think you do.
No, you don't, do you?
Because what happens is that you need to know what race is going off
before you. That's right. Yeah.
Know what time it is, because as soon as they've gone, you're free to get on.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to follow them around the warm-up lake, so you know you're not late.
And that's a really important one to know. Like you need to be aware, I think, also for the individual regattas that you're at, what that sequence is going to look like. And that's what, you know, we were saying earlier, it's a good reason to go up to the start, see what's going on, that sort of thing. With the Henley regattas, the other one that's important for that is the time trials. Know how the time trials are going to start, know exactly where the start is. So that's time trials for Henley Women's, qualifiers for Henley Royal, know how they're going to be started. One other question that we did get asked, which I will answer here, was about steering in the time trials or the qualifiers at Henley. And people often ask me this is, should you, if there's stream, you're rowing against the stream, so should you steer across the course so that you are out of the stream at certain parts? So should you be, should you be aiming to be out of the stream more, or should you just go straight down one side? I would put money on the fact that Matilda and Morgan are going to agree with me on this, but I would say 100%, you just go down one side. Do not play games trying to swap stations, just stay down the towpath side. Just stay, close to the booms, comfortably close. You don't have to be scraping them, but nice and straight. You are only going to waste time moving back and forth, and you are more likely to have an accident doing that. But it's important that you know the rules about being overtaken. It's important that it's important that you know what has to happen if a crew's overtaking you in those races. These are all in the rules, so go away and read them. There's just a question about the course walk. For Henley Women's, we're hoping it will take no more than 90 minutes, the course walk. We're going to aim for about 60 to be back at the finish in 60 minutes, but max 90 minutes. And obviously you can peel off earlier if you need to. The Henley Royal one will take slightly longer because it is physically longer. But again, we'll be aiming for 90 minutes max. Okay, guys, so I think that's it. I really appreciate everyone coming. We've really enjoyed ourselves. And again, Guin, thank you so much for coming along and giving us your insight on that. Like I said, our Buy Me a Coffee link is in the chat and the QR code is there. So please do, if you are able, support us, and please do sign up for those course walks. The Henley Women's one, information is already available on our social media. The Henley Royal one, you guys have got an early chance to sign up there. And I will put the link for the Henley Royal one back in the chat right now, but we will be starting to advertise that this week. So if you miss it today, you will be able to sign up later on this week. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate having you here, and we hope to see you at the course walks or at the regattas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.